A nice glass of homemade mead has got to be one of the most delicious things that so many of you are missing out on. This recipe is one of my favorites, and I'm going to show you how to make it yourself. So if you like the idea of a blueberry maple mead, then this video is for you. If you're brand new to this, it's crucial that you make sure to sanitize everything you'll be using before you even think about getting started. But don't overthink it. I know it seems intimidating at first, but it's honestly super simple. For the smaller pieces of equipment, I like to just take them apart and put them right in my vessel filled with sanitizer solution. But make sure to sanitize everything, and that includes your work surface. I know it seems like overkill, but you don't want to take any chances. The sanitizer I recommend is Starsan, and to be fair, I haven't tried others, but I haven't needed to because this stuff works great, and I will add the link to it in my bio along with everything else that I'll be using here today. So for this recipe, you'll need a 1 to 2 gallon fermenter. This can be a glass carboy or a plastic bucket, or really anything with an airlock should work. If it's got a spigot, that's a plus. The kit I'm using here is actually my very own, which you can check out on my website if it seems like something you'd like. It comes with all the equipment and ingredients you need. Also, if you do have a spigot, just make sure it's in the off position before you fill your jug, and you'll find out very quickly if it's not. So we will be starting with 3 pounds of blueberries. Yes, I am using Target blueberries. I'm not proud of it. I always try to shop at local farmers markets or pick wild fruit, but sometimes you've just got to go with what you got. And so the plan here is to get all of these berries into a bowl so that we can mash them, similar to how you would make wine actually. So take a few minutes, try to make sure that all of the berries are mashed, and you'll notice that very quickly it'll form this nice liquefied blueberry slurry, which is exactly what we want. You could probably get away with using a blender too, just be careful with the seeds because they can be bitter. Once you're done mashing, you want to pour this berry mash into a brew bag like this. I've also done this where I just put the berries into the jug directly, but the brew bag makes things a lot cleaner and a lot easier. That's actually the one thing that doesn't come included in my kits right now, and I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier, because they're so helpful, but don't worry, I'm working on getting them included very shortly. So it's best to sort of tie your brew bag around the lip of your jug to prevent what you see here. It just dropped right in. You'd think I've never done this before, but taking the time to secure it around the outside will make it way easier to get everything inside. The idea with the brew bag is later on when we want to remove the berries, we can just pull them all out at once, instead of having to worry about possibly transferring them into your bottles or getting things clogged and whatnot. But yeah, once everything's inside, just tie it up and we will set this whole thing aside for now. Also, be sure to have a roll of paper towel handy because brew days can be messy. So since the idea for this recipe is for it to taste like blueberry pancakes, we'll be using maple syrup and honey. If you don't want to use syrup, you can skip it and just use 3 pounds of honey, otherwise just go with 1.5 pounds of each. So all of the sugar you have in the honey and syrup, or whatever else you might want to add, will eventually ferment and turn into alcohol. In case you didn't know, that's how all alcoholic beverages, or I should say fermented beverages, are made, by yeast converting sugars into ethanol and CO2 gas. Now I'm just adding some spring water to this mix. I haven't done enough experimenting to see if spring water is really better than using like tap water or distilled water. I plan to do that, and I've done similar experiments and I like doing that sort of research, but for this I'm just going to go by what the experts say. So now what I'm doing here is getting this mixed up so that it dissolves, and that's easier to do on the side rather than in your main vessel. If I was smart, I probably would have just done this in the main vessel before adding the berries, but that's okay. And then once that's in, we will just continue adding water and fill it almost to the top. So if you're making this recipe and you're using a gallon glass carboy, I probably recommend not using mashed berries and instead just using the juice, because things can get wild and foamy when it ferments. The vessel I'm using is larger than a gallon, so we'll have plenty of room here considering we'll have to remove the berries later on, but we should still yield about a gallon. So now for the part that trips a lot of people up that I try to make as easy and approachable as possible, and that's adding yeast and nutrient. Let's start by hydrating the yeast. Different strains will usually have their own hydration instructions right on the packet, but in general you've got to mix the yeast with warm water and let it sit for 20 minutes. It's important that you actually use water in the temperature range stated on the pack so that you don't kill your yeast. Some people will add the dry yeast directly to your vessel, and I've done this too, but hydrating will give you a healthier fermentation and possibly reduce the chances of off flavors or stalls. I like to do this in a jar and just shake it up to make sure that everything gets mixed. So after 20 minutes we are good to go, but one trick I've been doing is adding 1 gram of Fermaid-O nutrient right to the same jar and mix it with the yeast first, because for whatever reason it can be super tough to dissolve on its own. And this part is optional, but I'm also adding pectic enzyme, which is just an ingredient that breaks down pectin in fruit and helps things clear up much quicker. I recommend doing your own research on step feeding nutrients and using different blends, because there's definitely ways to optimize your fermentation time, but I have played around with so many different methods and found great results with using about 1 gram of Fermaid-O once a day for the first 3 days of fermentation. For my recipes and for what I do, this works just fine for me. So that's it for ingredients, and now we want to determine what our potential alcohol by volume will be, and this is done by recording the starting gravity with a hydrometer. Essentially what this tool does is it measures the relative density of your liquid, which tells you how much sugar is present before and after fermentation. I recommend taking weekly measurements until that specific gravity stops changing, and that's how you know when fermentation is complete. It looks like I'm at about 1.11, and over the next few weeks it should get down to about 1.0. Sometimes it's slightly higher or even slightly lower, but that's okay. Now, because gas is produced during fermentation, we can't just seal this up, or else the pressure would probably build up and it would explode. So that's why we need to use an airlock, which will seal your mead from the outside environment, but still allow that CO2 to escape. I usually fill the airlock with water and sanitizer that'll bubble as gas is released. And I actually also made a batch of my glass kit just because I wanted to directly compare using the berries versus the juice. So I highly recommend labeling your mead with, at the very least, the starting gravity, because I've seen so many people not do this and then have no clue what their ABV is by the time their batch is finished. So now in the next day or two, this will start fermenting and bubbling, and that will typically continue for a few weeks before we can do anything else. I'm so excited to share the next steps of the process, and if this was helpful, make sure to leave a like and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future updates. See you next time.